I think it's normal to expect some profit taking. I mean, we just made all-time highs, and it is the weekend. But to me, we know that since April 2025, any of these pullbacks have been really shallow. And next week we know that there's something very important to watch. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be hesitant, but we know that ultimately it's a good thing when the Fed cuts.
I'm still bullish on U.S. stocks in the final few months of 2025 because there's two things that are positive catalysts.
Tom Lee starts with the Federal Reserve. His central thesis is simple. The Fed is about to resume its cutting cycle, and that matters a lot. Looking back at history, the Fed has almost never resumed a rate-cutting cycle in the fall. In fact, it's only happened twice before, once in 1998 and again in 2024. In both of those instances, the stock market didn't just hold steady, it boomed in the fourth quarter.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
I'm still bullish on U.S. stocks in the final few months of 2025 because there's two things that are positive catalysts. The first is that the Fed is going to resume its cutting cycle. And we looked back. So if you look at the entire history of monetary policy, the Fed has never resumed a cutting cycle in the fall. So it's only happened two other times in history.
And you're expecting this year as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
It's the Fed has signaled. So this would be the third time. The first time was 1998.
Yeah.
The second time was 2024. And this is the third time. In all the two prior cases, the stock market boomed in the fourth quarter because the Fed has been on pause and then they're finally cutting.
Oh.
The second is that the business confidence, the ISM manufacturing, actually has been below 50 now for 29 months. It will probably recover back to 50 once the Fed starts cutting. That's the longest stretch of the ISM below 50 in history. So that's really good for industrials and financials and small caps. So I think that this fall is a really broadening of the stock market rally where the banks and the industrials and the small caps are going to do as well as large cap tech. When the Fed resumes its cutting cycle, they have a lot of room to cut rates further because the Fed funds is at 4.5% right now, and inflation is probably closer to 2 or 2.5%. So it's the real interest rate is extremely tight. So I think there's a lot of room to cut. That will take a few years. I think this is really bullish for stocks.
Just really quickly, Tom, what do you make of the pullback in futures? Again, all three indices hit record highs. It's a very slight pullback, but what do you think the catalyst is for the pullback this morning?
Well, I think it's normal to expect some profit taking. I mean, we just made all-time highs, and it is the weekend. But to me, we know that since April 2025, any of these pullbacks have been really shallow. And next week we know that there's something very important to watch. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be hesitant, but we know that ultimately it's a good thing when the Fed cuts.
We have a lot of people in general that are concerned about over-concentration in the market. Ironically enough, we had a guest on earlier, Julia Herman from New York Life, that was saying that concentration was a good thing. But the valuation of this market's been a concern for a lot of people. But your word of the day is undervalued. What's undervalued right now?
Frank, I think Oracle surging 41% after they report earnings tells me that AI is an undervalued sector, because how else do you explain a stock that is as large as Oracle gaining as much as it is unless it shows investors are really underestimating the future growth of AI?
Just to be clear, what's undervalued? Are we talking about the chip sector? Are we talking about software? Are we talking about the hyperscalers? Are we talking about the Mag 7? Or is it everything in your mind?
Well, I wouldn't want to be too specific because, AI is still a 5 or 10 year story. And so I wouldn't want to be trying to drill this down into a really narrow set. I think AI as a theme is continually underestimated because I think a lot of people think this is money being spent without return. Oracle is showing you that there's a lot of future growth.
So with that in mind, Tom, your pick for us today is the IWM ETF, a small cap ETF. If AI is undervalued, why aren't you saying your pick for us today is a Palantir, an Oracle, a Vistra that helps power some of these data centers? Why are you going to the small caps?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, Frank, it's because exactly as I said, I wouldn't want to try to pick a slice of AI to talk about being undervalued. But if we think AI is undervalued, what's even more undervalued is small caps, because that's been held at bay because the Fed has not been cutting rates. Fed's been on hold all year. And for the first time since last year, the Fed is cutting in September. A September cut after a pause has only happened in 1998 and 2024, and both times were good periods for small cap stocks.
So a question to you, though. The same weakness in the economy and the job market that's leading the Fed to cut, doesn't that directly impact small caps?
Well, I think that we want to not be like oversimplistic in thinking about this. Number one, what is the Fed going to try to accomplish by cutting, especially if they're worried about the employment market weakening? They want to get the ISM to actually go back above 50. They want corporates to start hiring. They want businesses to be confident. So this rate cut is not just a symbolic cutting of interest rates for mortgages. It is really an attempt by the Fed to get the economy to grow again, to actually increase the job market. That's really bullish for small caps.
So why, if AI is undervalued, does Tom Lee recommend small caps instead of AI-specific stocks like Palantir or Oracle? His answer is strategic. AI may be a long-term growth engine, but small caps are even more undervalued in the near term. They've been held back all year by the Fed's pause, and historically, when the Fed resumes cutting in September, small caps perform especially well. Yes, some argue that weaker growth could hurt small caps, but Tom Lee explains that Fed cuts are designed to boost confidence, lift ISM above 50, and spur hiring.
As you know, is that journey to the nexus of understanding between macro, crypto, and the exponential age of technology. Several years ago, I developed a thesis called the Everything Code. The Everything Code is my all-encompassing macro framework that I've built over the last 35 years that builds upon the giant demographic trends, how that leads to a growth in debt, where the entire Western world plus China and Japan have been involved because of the same demographics issues, and how that debt is managed by the debasement of currency and liquidity in order to roll the debt, and how the debt is cyclical. It's generally between a 3-year and 5-year time horizon, and why that causes the economy and markets to be cyclical, including crypto, and how to navigate it and how to get forward read on it. And a forward read on it, we use things like the Global Macro Investor Financial Conditions Index leads by 9 months. And we also use the Global Macro Investor Global Liquidity Index, which leads by about 6 months. And those things, in combination with M2 and our other indicators, give us a really decent probabilistic read on how things play out. Now, we are kind of pioneers of this whole structure, but there's one other person that you know well who also looks at the world through a similar lens. Now, it's not quite the same, but he's truly a pioneer in this kind of debt cycle analysis and global liquidity.
Well, the answer is we're late. It's not inflecting downwards yet. We're still in an upswing. But, we've got to remember here that the liquidity cycle is, 34 months old. That's pretty mature as things go. We've got to be thinking of what could be the end game. I don't think there's anything on the horizon that could necessarily disrupt things, but there are clearly problems building. And I think, as we look into 2026 and probably beyond, there are factors to think about. And to my mind, the two biggest factors, number one is that there's a lot of debt that's got to be refinanced out there because debt was effectively termed out during the COVID crisis, large amounts when interest rates were zero. And that's coming back into markets to be refinanced really from sort of later this year, but through 26, 27. And the other thing we must, remember is that, strong economies don't always have strong financial markets. And the fact is that you've got US tech companies currently investing, $1 billion a day in IT and infrastructure. And, over the course of a year or so, a couple of years, that's going to take about $1 trillion out of markets, out of money markets. I mean, these are big amounts. So these companies may be seeing decent profits growth, but their cash flows are really plunging. And that's got to be a problem for financial markets in particular.
So let's dig in a little bit to the slowness of this cycle versus others. From our work is like, normally the liquidity cycle peaks around the business cycle peak. They're all, related. And the business cycle has been super low. If you look at the ISM, it's been below 50. And the strongest correlation to that is rates have been too high for too long. And that has kept the ISM lower than expected, which means it feels like it's elongated the liquidity cycle. So that's one factor that I'm looking at. The other one is the fact that they've been shoving everything into the bills market and not refining, in, let's say, the 5-year sector, that's kept this cyclicality. And I don't know if that structure is changing things because it requires ongoing liquidity as opposed to cyclical liquidity. So firstly, the business cycle and interest rates, and then, whether the structure of where they've been issuing makes a difference.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is we don't seem to have a business cycle. And if you look at almost any economy since the COVID crisis, everything's kind of flatlined. So there's no obvious business cycle around. And, we can conjecture as to why that may be. Is it because fiscal policy is dominant? Whatever. But the fact is that there's none. There is a liquidity cycle, and that seems to be paramount. And the interesting point is, which I'm sure you'll attest, is that, financial markets are responded not to the real economy, they're responded to the liquidity cycle. That's what's going on. So we need to understand this, like it or not. I mean, it's become the paramount issue in markets as far as we can see. So I think that's true.
Lee's analysis also fits into a larger macro framework. He notes that the economy has been unusually flat since the COVID crisis, with no obvious business cycle. Instead, what drives markets now is liquidity, the flow of money and credit. Financial markets are responding not to the real economy, but to liquidity cycles. This, in his view, is why stocks can rise even in the face of slow growth. The key is the Fed's ability to ease financial conditions and keep liquidity flowing.